in 2 years.
Before that, she was.
All right, I think we're way past time. Yeah, way past it. Sorry about that. Right,
Yes, I know.
let's go ahead and get started. First thing I want to do,
Oh my God.
we've been talking about passages, we've been talking about exegesis. Do you need a handout?
Yeah,
Anybody need a handout?
thank you.
And we've been going through the elements of exegesis, and the goal of this is to apply these to a passage if you want to study or know more about. And then,
Having surgery. Okay. This is our table for. One of the people on our bus or in. Well, at the bus stop, I mean, a restaurant thing, and
We were just 17 minutes north of Harrisonburg, so the ambulance took her to the
so
hospital.
she called him to go.
But she has a broken femur.
was this at Bucky's?
Had her going.
Was this at Bucky's?
It was on the way home.
Yeah, I know, it was at a rest area.
Yeah.
Well,
But
you
it
would have
wasn't
known it was
It
Bucky's.
wasn't Bucky.
All right.
It was just one of the rest areas on
Well,
81.
if it's still not ready, sorry.
Did she like have clapped twice or something? She did.
Slam the table.
That doesn't work.
That's a ball. Which ear? Which your ear? Which ear? We can start, David. No, right.
Well, it does work, it works for children. It's designed to work for children, but it works for older adults who just don't want to stop talking.
As long as they can hear you.
Well, no, that's what I know, the older adults, but the fact that you're whispering gets people's attention.
Oh, well.
Have you ever heard a pastor
No.
do that from the pulpit? And they start talking softly, and then everyone starts listening. That's
I
correct.
just complaining in here.
Well, no, it's a rhetorical technique. It's a homiletical technique. You don't talk softly the whole sermon.
Just some.
You just talk softly when you're trying to make an important point. And then everybody's leaning in, they're trying to hear, and then the point's made. And then, of course, you make the point much louder when you get everybody's attention. Okay, enough of that. So you're a good class, you know that. I love y'all and all that stuff, but passages for exegesis. So we've been talking about a passage that we might want to study in the future once we go through the elements of the exegesis. So I've been asking people to sign this sheet. I have it up there, it's here now. And but these are the passages we have so far, so I could start some preparation, because we'll probably do this in a couple of weeks. Do any of these passages sit with you? Someone suggested Genesis 22, which is the near sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham. You know that story, correct? Where Abraham is called by God to sacrifice his son. So he gets it, puts it on him on an altar, he's ready to go. Well, and the reason this would be good to study, it is awful, but child sacrifice wasn't unheard of in that time. So, so exegesis, this would be a good one for exegesis. Mark 9:2-13, that's transfiguration, where Jesus goes up on the mountain with a couple of disciples, not all of them. And he's transfigured in form, and he's talking to Elijah and Jesus and a bunch of people. And then there's Ezekiel 1, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. All the major prophets have a call narrative. And this is, Ezekiel's call narrative is actually 1-3, but the person who wanted us to study this, just wanted chapter 1. But we would look at it in its overall context of 1-3, focus on chapter 1. Then someone put Genesis 6:1-4. And that's in Genesis chapter 6, the first 4 verses. That's where the sons of God come down and interact in an intimate way with human women and have children. We call them the Nephilim. And that's a possible passage. Here's one, Mark 3:1-6, where Jesus heals on the Sabbath. And that's not a good thing because, according to some people, because you're not supposed to heal any or rend medical attention to anyone on the Sabbath unless it's life threatening. And then second Thessalonians 1:3-22. That's right. All right. 3-12, I knew that didn't, right? I don't think there's 22 verses in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. And I didn't write anything there. It starts off with some thanksgiving by Paul, then it gets into in an introduction to the main part of the letter, which is the second coming of Jesus, and what to do with people who are apostates, people who are not following the word the way they should. Do any of these speak to you?
Yeah, I'd like to check on those sons of God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joe Sollenberger suggested that one. He's not here, so it's okay for me to say. I would say that.
Let's see, we can wait for Jerry.
Oh, no, we're not gonna do it today.
Oh.
We're gonna do this in a couple of weeks. I'd like to get started on one. Any else?
Sacrifice of Isaac.
Sacrifice of Isaac, Ray Beckram, suggested that one.
Okay.
When you said it was normal to sacrifice,
I didn't say it was normal.
I mean, it
I
was-
said it wasn't unheard of.
okay, sorry, not,
That's all right. I mean, you took it that way.
well, I mean, normal for them that would occur, not normal for,
Yeah, I don't think it occurred every day, but in some of the other religions, not so much the Israelite religion, but in some of the other religions in the ancient Near East, child sacrifice.
That in the Maya and Inca too.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know that, yes. So, yeah, child sacrifice can be part of people's traditions, and it's barbaric, but it's there.
What is Thessalonians?
2 Thessalonians 1:3-2, there's an element of thanksgiving, and then it starts to get into, because Paul begins most of his letters with an element of thanksgiving. Thankful for the people he's writing to. But that's only a couple verses. Then he moves into an introduction to some of the issues, or maybe the main issue of the letter, which has to do with the second coming of Christ, and also what to do with people who aren't following the word. Okay, you want to do second Thessalonians.
Could we ask the prodigal son? I always, the brother, that always gets me, the one who always did everything, and then he sort of gets.
So that is Luke
Appreciated.
The party.
And that's a.
15,
Oh, yeah,
and we talked about that last time
yeah,
a little bit. That's 11-32. I won't always have that in my mind, but I have it in mind at my fingertips today.
John David's nephew did a really good Bible study on Luke 15.
Yeah, I wasn't able
No,
to go to that one.
That was really quite interesting. Took that whole thing apart and
Yeah. So, what do you think? Do you want me to choose one? Do you want to choose one?
Start with
Well, what
that.
do you feel like you talk about the most?
Well, my favorite passage is Isaiah 65:17-25. But you know, some people don't like the Old Testament passages. I mean, we deal with the Old Testament here. I'm not gonna let us get away with not.
Let's take apart that Genesis 6:1-4. That looks interesting. The sons of God.
Yeah, do you want us to like vote on this?
Aren't we gonna do all of them?
We can. I mean, now, is that how you wanna spend the rest of your year? I mean, that's fine. I mean, we can do these and others will crop up. I hope others do crop up, just like Peggy said. Let's do was it you? Yeah. Let's do the prodigal son. I mean, I look at these passages, I'm not really interested in these, although this was my suggestion. Mark 3:1-6, because Jesus is healing on the Sabbath and there's a passage right before that about them plucking the grain on the Sabbath. And even that wasn't allowed. So that would get us into a historical context of what the Sabbath means. And then I think that would, after we do the exegesis, it would help us move into, well, what does the Sabbath mean today? And you can talk about not mowing the yard on Sunday, but what does it mean to be in Sabbath with God? I mean, pastors take a sabbatical every 5 or 7 years, and so and that could open up a really good discussion on once we do the exegesis to life application.
David, when you do the Genesis 6, I'd be interested in you coordinating that with Joe, since Joe is so well versed on so many things. Why did he find that questionable scripture?
Well, yeah, he just he was joking, says, okay, I'll put one up there. I'm doing Genesis
Really?
1-4. And the reason is it's this whole notion. Now, it'll be good for exegesis because you've heard me say this before. When we're talking about Genesis 1-11, we're not talking about anything that has a time or historical reference to it. And I don't think this is new to you. It may be new the second time around. It's real. Every culture has a prehistory or a mythology. And Genesis 1-11 is an example of that. Adam and Eve, we can't put a time frame to that. People try to, but they can't do it because Adam and Eve, okay, were created by God. As the story goes, they had Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Then Cain has some children. Where did his wife come? So, I mean, you can go with that. And then the next story is Noah and the flood. No historical reference. We have people looking for Noah's Ark all the time. And I'm just going to say I'm not going to find it. Now, if they find it, then I can change my mind. But I don't think, and then the Tower of Babel would be the next story. A lot of these are etiologies. They explain why we have a rainbow in the sky. The Tower of Babel explains why we have different languages. The Garden of Eden that talks about why women experience change and experience pain in childbirth. So some of these are etymologies also where they're trying to explain why certain things happen that we don't quite understand.
I just want to applaud you for using the word mythology.
I know, we've had a discussion before, she loves it when I use that word, because, well, in one sense, I believe that's what it is. It's not till you get to Genesis 12 with the story of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, that whole saga, which finishes out the rest of the book of Genesis, that you begin to have something that resembles a culture that existed, like we call those patriarchs or the ancestors, and we don't know if Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were actual people, but the way they're described in Genesis 12 through 50 is, it represents how archaeologists portray life in the 17th and the 18th century BC. So that's when we start to get to some historical, realistic culture. But Genesis 1 to 11, those are just, I would say, you know, I can use the word mythology, but this is ancient Israel's prehistory story. And every culture has a prehistory, at least the ancient cultures.
Well, isn't it just their way of explaining how they came into existence?
Yeah, some of it is that, and then it's just these stories were around, you know, and so that's part of it. But then there are larger issues like the flood narrative. You know, don't you know, and that just raises the whole thing about what do you do when God decides He wants to start over? Of course, He said He'd never do that again. We're not going to start over, but
Nice.
so. All right, I can choose one, or do we have a consensus?
Yeah, yeah.
Genesis 22, say, yeah.
Let's do it.
Mark 9, yeah.
Just
Pick
pick
your
one,
one.
just pick one.
Well, I heard some people, I heard some people say this one. So maybe we'll start with that one, do an Old Testament one, and then for New Testament, we can do this or this. If you guys love the gospel, whenever we talk about the gospels, you guys come alive.
Yeah,
Now, what we haven't done in this class with the topics and everything, we haven't done a lot with Paul. So I might, instead of 2 Thessalonians, I might choose another Pauline passage, and that would help us get into who Paul was. And so we can do an Old Testament, a gospel, and a Pauline passage. So we'll start off with Genesis 6:1-4, and I'll shoot Joe an email. See, he comes and goes. Sometimes they go up to State College. But we'll definitely be involved.
David, I do want to know what Kate's beef is with the word mythology.
It's not a beef. It's like,
Love it.
It's a.
Oh,
she's
I love it. I support it.
See, I wasn't catching what was.
Yeah,
going on.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
she was saying, oh, I'm so glad you used the word mythology. Because when we come to Genesis 1 to 11, some people do want to make those, and I talked about it, how people are looking for the ark and I just make the case, I'm unapologetic, but I also know that people might struggle when I say this is mythology or a prehistory for ancient Israel. But I think everyone here kind of hits that. I'm not sensing any struggle, but there's definitely, and when we get into the sons of daughters or sons of men who marry,
That sounds like that.
yeah, it is, and we'll get into that because we're talking about God up in heaven who might have an entourage, and so that'll get us into all of that. Once,
Yeah, but I was just, the other thing is, so much of what I understand and able to relate to God, and especially in the Old Testament, is that it's so much written in metaphorical language, not the literal. That some people, they are very poetic people. They and use metaphor to explain things and lighten things. As we talk about the shadow of the valley, or the valley of the shadow of death, they weren't walking through Sheol necessarily. They're going down into the other world. It's a metaphor.
yeah. And in other Psalms, when they talk about Sheol,
Yeah.
it's like you have one foot in death.
Mhm.
And we see it today, and 1 foot in life. I mean, you're circling the
That's
drain.
a metaphor.
Yeah, you're circling the
That's a
drain, which is another metaphor. That's what a lot of these songs are. So the songs are heavy on metaphor. The prophets are huge on metaphor.
I mean, the word poetry and song, they all come from the same etymological beginning of that same word.
Now,
Can't ignore that.
the New Testament, Paul, he's big on metaphor and the parables are basically metaphoric for what they want to say. So the Bible is just full of metaphor, but I think what Kate's saying, sometimes the Bible is difficult to relate to, and if you pay attention to the metaphor, it sort of makes it a bit easier.
Was it Revelation just one giant metaphor?
Pretty much. Some of it very grotesque. But, and one passage was Revelation 11, and it could be a number of passages. We tend to focus on Revelation 22, the new heavens and earth, and I'm not shy of doing Revelation, but if we choose a passage on Revelation, there's gonna be some work for us to do before we get into that passage, just because people, most of us don't quite understand Revelation anyway. And then those who have worked with it have taken it totally out of context. And Jason had a pretty good sermon a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know if it was on Revelation per se, but it was just on, the rapture. And the rapture really isn't referred to much at all in Revelation. And he hit the nail on the head. He said, this whole notion of the rapture and dispensations, that was all humans, and I'm gonna say made up, but they developed the scheme, and it goes back to John Darby. He may not have been the one he's the one who fully put it together. And so there's books out there, The Rapture Exposed by Barbara Rossing, great book, where they just look at this and say, look, the rapture is really not biblical. Robert Jewett, it's an older book, Jesus Against the Rapture. He takes passages where Jesus is actually preaching against the rapture. So, so Revelation is a tricky book. People have done a lot of weird things with it. But there have been people you took a class with Eric Landrum, and I forget the book, it's a good book.
Yeah, I haven't, I forgot it.
And then Bernard Eller wrote a book, He's Brethren, the most revealing book of the Bible, and his big thing there is don't look at Revelation as a roadmap. That wasn't how it was written. It was written for metaphor, and it was written at a time. See, apocalyptic literature comes up when people are suffering and they use this kind of grotesque metaphoric imagery because they can't find any way else to depict a way to move to hope.
He was anti-Rome.
Definitely anti-Rome. Wholly anti-Rome.
Should spend 2026 going through that.
What's that?
Just spend 2026, you can walk us through all of Revelation.
Okay. Yeah.
I actually genuinely think that would be
If
interesting.
you want to spend some time on it, we will.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't know if I can
pastors
actually know the year,
Well,
but it would actually be interesting to talk about,
Yeah,
hear you
I
talk
agree.
about, yeah.
Versus what we hear on.
So just put that one down at the bottom.
all right.
But I don't wanna go through the whole book, so this is a separate after whatever we're doing next.
Well, okay.
So maybe in like.
I see what you mean.
And
Yeah, because I'd rather not apply exegesis to it now. If we can work through the book of Revelation, and we'll apply exegesis as we go through, then we can pick out the passage. I'll finish by saying there was a maintenance worker at a university, and he was reading Revelation on his lunch hour. He was on a bench, he was outside enjoying everything. And an uppity religion professor came by, he stopped to chat with him and said, what you reading? Oh, I'm reading Revelation. He says, I bet you're having trouble understanding it. He said, no, I understand it perfectly. Jesus wins. And that is the message of Revelation. All focuses on Jesus, because there is dualism, and we talked about that before. Good versus evil, heaven versus hell. God versus Satan. And so you have some of that, or a lot of that in Revelation.
I'd like to say that today.
The ultimate, yeah, there's plenty of evil and good forces, and of course, the problem with today is, well, what's this evil and what is good? You know, and we have that with fake news. What is the truth? And we can't agree on that. And somehow we'll just take something that we think is true and just mangle it and say, this is the truth. And so what do you do with that? I mean, we're all struggling with that. All right, are we good? Genesis 6, 1-4, and then we'll go from there. I think we agreed we would take a Old Testament passage, a gospel, and then I will pick a Pauline passage. One that I think that will kind of get us in. Hopefully it's a passage that people use and might be familiar with. Genesis 6, 4.
David, if we're gonna be talking about Genesis 6 and a bit of almost mythology.
Yeah,
Wouldn't Genesis 22 go right along with that?
yeah, but it's, you're kind of straddling a little bit because you're bringing in some things from other religions, but we're out of the mythology section, which is really Genesis 1-11. And now we're getting into, as I said, with Genesis 12-50, we're in a time period that does resemble Canaanite and ancient Israelite culture at that time. But they're bringing in a practice that, and I'm not sure that was mythology, it was a practice that they actually did. So we're bringing in some barbaric practices.
Situation.
Let's talk about this. All right, turn to your handout. While I finish writing up here. And we've been working on going through, my goal here, and I hope we're achieving it, is to become familiar with the aspects of exegesis. And then, as I said earlier, once we're familiar with it, then let's take the passage and apply it. And I've been careful not to call these steps, although I will slip and do that. I want to call the various elements of exegesis elements and aspects, because there may be some of these elements that may not apply to a particular passage. And then when that happens, we just if it's not applicable, then we just move on to the next one at that time. So last time we did work with Luke 15, and we argued, and actually we wanted to, I put up on the board Luke 15, 8-10, which is the parable of the lost coin. And then the parable of the lost coin follows the parable of the lost sheep. And then those two parables, I argued, lead up to the larger parable, which is the parable of the prodigal son. So Luke 15 contains three parables of where something is lost and then it is found. I don't know if Chris got into that or not, set that context in the overall chapter 15. So, and I thought that was a really good example of the literary context. So we have to look at the literary context of the passage that we deal with. But now the next one, that's just a little review of what we did last time. The next one is historical context. So when we're looking at a passage, we do have to look at its historical context, time period, what was going on at that time. And at NOAC, Chris Bowman was talking about in the first Bible study, Romans 15, I believe, and he really set the stage. And there were other keynote speakers and preachers who did the same thing he did at NOAC, where they were setting the stage about how Rome, to some degree, shaped what how Christianity was reacting to Rome. But you can't talk about various things that are happening in the Bible, especially the New Testament, without talking about Rome. Chris hit it hard, Dominic Gilliard hit it hard, and I think Samuel Sapira hit it pretty hard in his sermon. So, and we didn't stay Friday morning, so I don't know what was her name, Audrey, or I don't know if she hit that.
Sam.
But so let's look at Luke 2, 1-7, very familiar passage to you. That's the birth of Jesus. Glad I had that cover on there. Always fall. Wow. And what I'm concerned here, I mean, 2, 1-7, and I'm really concerned with the first several passages that really set the background for the birth, the historical background for the birth of Jesus. Because then we get to the point where they get there and Mary's about to deliver and there's no room in the inn, or my translation says there's a place in the guest room. There's been a lot of recent research on what that means, but typically we see it, there's no room in the inn, so they went outside. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus. So Caesar Augustus, we're looking at what? 27 BCE or BC to 14 AD or CE. So that's the time of Caesar Augustus. Then, and so a decree goes out by Caesar saying that all the world should be registered. So we're really talking about a census here. This was the first registration that was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And so what happened then, according to the next verse, all people went to their own towns, or the town where they were raised, or maybe where their ancestors came from. I don't know how far that went back, but it says it here. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth to Galilee in Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and family of David. So this is what's going on. Now, we have to look at the historical context. So when you do Bible study on your own or with a group, you're going to have some historical resources available. So you can know what this context is. It's, a lot of times we don't know. So hopefully you'll have something, but you have to learn, you have to know that Quirinius was governor of Syria, and he really didn't come to power till about 6 AD, 6 CE. So in Luke, we have this whole notion of a census of people going from their hometowns to the other, or from where they're living to their quote unquote hometowns. But it's about All right, slaves. Now. Let's go to Matthew 2.
What's CE?
Common era. It's the modern equivalent of BC. Some would say political
Well,
correct.
Isn't CE 80?
AD, yes. Some would say,
Well, you have BC.
Yes.
Yeah.
CE,
Yeah.
PE is.
thank you.
Good.
Number one, I'm somewhat exhausted from NOAC. Two, I was up till past midnight, so.
It's like the separation of like tracking time from religion.
Yeah, okay, and this is actually relevant to our discussion today, because in a minute, we're gonna talk about something. Well, let's do that, and I'll come back to the importance of CE. In Matthew 2. First couple verses, what are you reading? Let's come and start reading.
In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem.
Okay,
Asking.
that's enough. Huh, go ahead.
Asking, where is the child?
Yeah.
Who has been born king of the Jews?
So, according to Matthew. According to Matthew. Jesus was born during the reign of King Herod, who ruled from 37 BCE to 4 BCE. And the reason I stressed 4 in my inflection is because we have a conflict here. Luke is saying Jesus was born around 6 AD or CE, and according to Matthew, Jesus, if King Herod dies in 4 BC, he has to be born before. Or before 4 CE. And I'm not going to try to resolve that in doing an exegesis, but when you do, let's say you're reading, this is your passage, you want to be aware of the historical context. What we have is we have 2 different versions. Matthew's saying one thing, Luke's saying another thing. And at one point in my life, I would have called those contradictions. Now I'm just calling those different voices. And you all have helped me with that. And I think you knew, I've talked about this before. This is Matthew's voice about Jesus' birth. This is Luke's voice. And so Luke is saying, hey, this is the Mediterranean Sea. This is the Sea of Galilee. This is the River Jordan. This is the Dead Sea. This is Jerusalem. And then, I'm doing this for something else. Sorry. I'm all over the places.
That's about to call you out.
Well, I probably could have made it work. So where I want to go with this, back to, so you have a historical discrepancy. So when you look at the text in its historical context, you're going to find, some issues going on here. But let's go back to CE, the common error, because if you say BCE, before Christ, and AD, which means the year of the Lord, Anno Domino, something like that for Latin. That's what AD means, the year of the Lord. So, we really don't know when Jesus died. So, people said, we're going to start at 0. And that's what we've been doing anyway. So we go from the BC or BCE goes up to 0, And then from 0, we keep going the other way. And so we call 0 the common era. And so any year before that, like the Old Testament, for example, but also Roman history prior to the year 0 would be before the common era. And then any year after that would be the common era. And so that's where it comes from. It's a more scholarly way of looking at it. When Chris did his Bible study, he went this route. So when he put dates up there, he put BCE, then CE, at Noah. So some people think we're doing it to be politically correct because Jews and Muslims, aren't really into Christ, and that's not part of their religion. But it's really more than that. It's saying BC and AD aren't quite accurate with before Christ and the year of the Lord. So BCE and CE, it's really more in academic circles, but it's more accurate than to say, okay, we don't know when Jesus died. Did he die somewhere before 4 BC, or did he die somewhere, or not die? Was he born around 6 CE? We just don't.
What also is interesting is that that's the Gregorian calendar, right, which was established by the church.
Yeah.
Of the time, so like they looked at it all,
Sure.
and their best guess was this will be a 0.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Counting, but that wasn't established until a long time after all this.
Well, in the Western.
That's correct.
Right, and they're-
Fibonacci at 1200. I just looked.
Okay.
I don't hold those things in mind.
In like geologic history, we don't even, you just do like million years ago, like when they're doing.
It's just the best guess.
Yeah, they just do like 4 million years ago, like they don't actually do any of this.
Right.
And our lifespan is so short, we're used to things being pretty. Like we can conceive of like 30 years ago, but once we start thinking about 200, like that's really hard to wrap your head around just how long ago.
70.
Sure.
Yeah, no, it is. It's hard. And then to say that we were in or outside of Jericho, actually, and we saw a Neolithic tower that was about 10,000 years old. That's kind of hard to
Yeah.
comprehend.
Big numbers are really hard for us to
Well,
wrap our heads around.
there's word around that a good friend of ours is going to be the first trillionaire. I mean,
Right.
who
That
needs
number.
$1 trillion and that's all on paper.
Yeah,
I mean, they say $1 trillion, how many times would you be, if you
Right.
put out $1?
Yeah.
How many times would you go to the moon and back? It's just, I can't even conceive of a
Did
million,
you ever
really.
touch the
A million.
10,000-year-old tower?
No,
Yeah, you
it was all marked off, you couldn't go into it or anything, but that was way before Old Testament times, but it was a fortified tower. They uncovered it, maybe 100 years ago or so. Okay, what do you think about the historical context? You need to. And then you begin to talk about authorship, you begin to talk about social setting, you begin to talk about other things. What else did I have listed there? Geographic setting, and then a date, we might wanna date the passage if we can. So looking at the passage in its historic context is important.
Dave, I find it really interesting and important, with a historical context. It, since my former husband sees some social studies.
Yeah.
And, I've always thought, I got into that with him. When we travel, I go for books that have historical, or written about something that happened.
Yeah.
And,
And with the Bible, I find it so fascinating that, it's a history book. Now, some people will call me, I don't know what, but it is basically a history book of God and then Jesus, a prophet.
Yeah, I mean, it reflects history. I mean, like
Yeah.
we said, when we talk about Genesis 1 to 11, we can't put a historic context or a history context to it. Or we look at the Psalms, yeah, 73 of the 150 Psalms are ascribed to David, but David didn't write those 73 Psalms.
Yeah.
in my opinion, because some of them are reflecting the exile, and David would have been dead 400 years, so.
There's a lot of explanation.
But your point is that I wasn't trying to negate it, but the Bible was written in a historic context.
Right.
So if we want to understand Revelation, we have to understand Rome. If we want to understand Paul, we have to understand Rome.
Mhm.
If we want to understand Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, we have to understand Assyria and Egypt and Babylon.
Yeah,
So
right, yeah. That's why I say it's historical, but I know. I know what you're saying.
yeah, and I know I'm talking about Noach a lot, and not all of you went.
Yeah, we did.
So, yeah. We missed you all, we know.
Yeah.
But where's I going with that? Oh, yeah, people would come up to me and say, boy, Chris's Bible studies were refreshing because we don't get that in our Sunday school classes. The teachers, they don't talk about the historic context. And so there are some people who don't really care about it. You do,
Right, yeah.
and this class does. And we're making the argument here with exegesis, you can't understand the passage fully unless you get into the historical
Well, if
context.
you don't get into the historical context, then you tend to look at it in the context of your time. And that is really wrong,
Yeah,
because our culture is so different from the culture of
Right.
that time period.
and Don is on to something here, because one of the goals of exegesis is to try, as much as we can't do it fully, but to try to understand what that passage meant,
For our culture.
in that time period.
Bring it.
What did it mean in that time period? And we have to do that first
Yes,
before we bring it to our time period. Because one of the the end goal of exegesis is for life
what does it
application.
mean for us?
What does it mean for us today? But we really can't do that unless we understand what it meant historically, or when it was written, and to people who would have read it, or those who couldn't read, to people who would have heard it. And so,
And isn't that part of it also, that a lot of times it was an oral type of tradition? So you need to tell a story that captivates your audience.
that's right.
And like Revelation, that captivated the audience. And yet you need to pull that apart and say, what's the message? And what was the audience actually hearing? Because what I might understand was not what they automatically understood.
Yeah, and just a real brief notion, I hinted at it earlier. Revelation was written during the reign of Domitian, who was one of the most barbaric emperors and persecuted Christians. So Revelation was written out of a deep period of suffering. So people who were suffering, they went to Revelation because that was almost the only thing that could give them some sense of hope. So through all that crazy stuff to get to where Jesus wins.
Well, sometimes I look at it, like today listening to a stand-up comedian. That means something to us because we know the references they're making.
Mhm.
But it would mean nothing to another culture, to another time, because they would not understand who you're making fun of or nothing.
So context is very important, whether we're talking about historic context, literary context within the Bible itself, And we did that with the parable of the prodigal, the parable of the lost coin, because that really helps set the stage for the parable of the prodigal son. So, boy, I wish we had more time. We're 10:15, so I just can't get into the next, we are moving along. We did spend quite a few time on trying to figure out how we're gonna do passages. But we have a good goal on that, and then, we'll just keep going. I'd say 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be done with this, and then we'll be able to jump into Genesis 6:1-4. And we'll do that. I hope we don't spend all fall on that. I don't anticipate that. It's a pass. We'll do it. We'll get out of it, and then we'll go on to the next passage. Might be the prodigal son, and then, or the one on the Sabbath, and then we'll get into a policy pass. Okay. Have a good worship. Let's worship together. And, see you next week.
And you think,